Hey guys, Brian here from Starlite Pulp. Hope everybody's well out there. So today on the Pulpcast, we've got Mr. Jack Clark, and so he is the author of a number of novels. Probably the most famous at this point is Nobody's Angel, which was on Hard Case Crime, and then his most recent is Nickel Dime Town, which came out just last year. So Jack, how you doing today, man?
Yeah, very good. How are you doing?
I'm outstanding, man.
Oh,
The,
cool.
living the dream. It's a Friday, you know. Uh, so talk to me first off about first let's start with Nobody's Angel. And
Okay.
this was a book that was a Shamus Award finalist. And
No,
oh, it was not?
no, Westerfield Chain was a Shamus Award finalist. My first private eye novel.
Got it. Okay. And thank you for that, by the way. And so with with Nobody's Angel, why don't you give us, if you would, just kind of a not necessarily a synopsis, not necessarily an elevator pitch, but just kind of a an introduction to Eddie Miles and what the book's about.
Well, Eddie Miles is just a cab driver in Chicago. When he's a night driver. Doesn't have much of a life. He's divorced. His wife took the daughter out your way to California, and he hasn't seen her in years. And that's all he really does is drive. He's got a little affair going with the next door neighbor, but not much else. And so then he gets involved in this. He finds a girl who's been left for dead in the alley, and and then the same night, this very same night, one of his cab driving friends is killed.
Hmm.
So he just kind of gets involved in looking for these. So it's an amateur. I always say it's an amateur detective novel.
Sure.
It's just that he's not a very good detective.
Sure. Sure.
He's still a cab driver. So, but it's a lot about the cab driving business. It's a lot about Chicago. People that don't like the book complain that it's just people. Eddie's just picking up fares and dropping them off. But I always say they're not paying attention. If you're looking for a plot heavy book, this is not it.
Yeah. Okay.
But people like it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, absolutely.
I could tell you, it's my
And
first novel.
yeah, and you were correct me if I'm wrong, but you were a cab driver, yeah?
Yeah, 40 years I drove a cab.
Okay. So I mean I can only imagine I can only imagine. Hey, I gotta ask. So you got Eddie Miles here. How much of Eddie Miles is based on you as a person and cab driver versus how much of the story itself is predicated or based off of things that you either saw or heard about while you were driving cabs?
Well, a lot of this, most of this stuff came right out of the newspaper. There were these group of guys here that were picking up white guys that were picking up black prostitutes in a van, mutilating them. I mean, they were weird guys
Uh-huh.
and killing them, most of them. Then they didn't kill this one girl. They left her for dead and somebody found her. So that was I thought, well, what if Eddie Miles found a girl like that? And
Sure.
that one, and she described this van well enough to the police that the police, they didn't put it out. The Area 5 detectives here, they did a great job with that. And they just kept looking for it. And one day they found it. And the main guy, I forget his name, Getz or something like that, he actually worked with John Wayne Gacy at one point.
Mm.
Yeah, one of the guys got executed. Uh, but anyways, that was really it. I mean, that was the. But even by the time Relita's Angel came out, which is this book, the first that I self-published, uh, I forgot that I got that. And then I was at a party one day, and this woman who was a nurse says, I was at the hospital when they brought some of those girls in. I thought, oh yeah, that's right. This is real. This
No.
really happened.
Right, right,
These guys. So, but really, the serial killer thing in the book is not what the book's about.
right.
It's not about the serial killer. I mean, he's there. He makes an appearance,
Mhm.
but it's not about him. It's more about the city of Chicago and the cab business and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And by the way, I just want to throw out there for everybody that is interested or anything else, uh, Eddie Miles from Nobody's Angel is actually going to be featured in a story that Jack sent to us for the next review 6, uh, called Eddie Miles Drives Again. And so we're excited to put that out this summer. But explain to me how so you've had self-published books, right? And you've been in the publishing industry for a while, but this one got to hard case crime. How did that, what was the process with that?
Well, I was just, what happened? How did this happen? So I'll just tell you the whole thing. I'd given up on fiction. And then right when I was just about to turn 40, I
Mhm.
read a newspaper article about certain professions, and it said the average age of a novelist was in his 40s. So I thought, let me try this again. Let me give it another try. And I'd been trying to write a detective novel since I was about 16, which, the kind of results you're going to get at 16. But anyways, so I thought, well, let me try a cab driver novel. So within a couple of days, I knew I could write the book. It was just like this works.
Right. Yeah.
So then I wrote the book and I rewrote the book. I got an agent and they sent it around and people, the agents, I mean, the editors basically he said, a lot of them said, you got to get this guy out of the cab because he was in the cab all the time. But I
Right.
wanted to keep him in the cab because that's the nature of the cab business. The only way to make any money is to stay in the fucking cab.
Right. Of
So I
course.
wanted to keep him there. So, anyways, and then they wanted me to rewrite it. This went on for years, and I rewrote it a little bit based on this or based on that. And then I realized I was destroying the book that I really liked.
Right.
So I thought if I could write one book, I can write another book. But
Mhm.
let me get rid of this thing. So I self-published it, and this was before self-publishing was that easy. This
Right.
was
Yeah. No, without question. Yeah.
Morris Publishing. I think it was in Kearney, Nebraska, or somewhere like that.
Uh-huh.
And they're a cookbook publisher. They're still in business, and but they would do this. So I mean, I sent them the pages. A friend of mine printed the pages, and I still regret because the print's much too small. It's not a good looking.
Right.
Still regret not paying the extra money and having more pages, but I wanted to sell the book cheap. Uh, so anyways, I got it printed. I think it's a nice looking book, and then
Mhm.
I sold it for $5 in the cab, and it got there, and then I wrote another book. So that's when I wrote Resterfield's Chain.
Right.
So I wrote that. It got a Seamus Award, but St. Martin's was not interested in the follow up.
Hmm.
Probably because the editor hated me, probably with good reason, but that's a long story. I'm not going to tell here. Uh, but anyways, my friend Jim Wortley was an actor out in L.A. and he wanted to write a screenplay of Nobody's Angel with me. So of Relita's Angel, rather. That's the
Yeah.
original title. So we did a screenplay. And then Jimmy didn't do anything. I don't know. I thought maybe he was going to try to get a movie made with, but he just wanted to write the screenplays. So then I had the screenplay, but it was an improved version. So then I rewrote the book with
Uh-huh.
some of the stuff from the screenplay in it. And I tell Jimmy that some of his words are in there, but I'm never going to tell him which ones are his.
Right. Right. Right.
Uh, but some of the lines in there are his, a couple here and there through the book. So I rewrote the book again. And then I sent it here, there, and the other one got nowhere. And then I found some and Charles was on it, and he was really pretty much my last hope.
Hmm.
No, I take it back. I take it back. I sent him two detective novels first. I had two private eye novels followed Westerfield's Chain. Like an idiot, I kept writing these things.
Uh-huh.
So I had Highway Side. I sent him that, and he got to about page 75, and he lost interest. And I sent him uh, Dancing on Graves, and he got to about page 75 and lost interest. And if you can get Charles past page 75, then maybe it's all right.
Apparently, that's the trick. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyways, so then I said, well, I got this other book, but it was self-published. So I said, but it was only 500 copies, and it was never in stores, except in a couple stores where I did consignment things. And so he said he'd take a look at it, and then he disappeared on me because well, whatever. That's another story. Uh, but anyway, so that's how it got to Hard Case Crime.
Okay. Yeah, and one thing I've noticed because weirdly in the same kind of experience, I was shopping around outlaw ballads after A Trunk Full of Zeros, which I had already written, that was published, and that was great and all that. But now I'm looking for outlaw ballads, and it's a collection of short stories, right? And it's incredibly difficult to publish a collection of short stories, especially genre short stories in today's marketplace. And so I actually sent it to Charles, and I was so uh, impressed isn't the right word, but just I was kind of blown away that he literally got back to me within a day and said, "Hey, I really like some of these, but we just don't publish short stories." And I'm not going to say that led to me starting Starlight Pulp. It's much more complicated than that, but that was kind of one of the things that made me go, okay, this is there's things here, and he has been with you as well as with me, very receptive towards just getting these projects and giving feedback relatively quickly, which is crazy from a publisher because if you send it off to Vintage Crime or you send it off to Random House, you're not going to hear anything for 6 months, 8 months. Uh,
Exactly.
but
No, I had the same experience. Charles gets back to you, and he also gives you great notes.
yeah,
He gives great notes. He's not afraid to tell you what he thinks is wrong with the book, which is great. It's I mean that's what writers need.
yeah, it's true.
We all think the book's fucking great. Our books are great. We need people to tell us what's wrong with them, not what's right with them.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. The worst thing somebody can say is, "Oh, I have no notes. It was great. No notes."
Yeah,
And
I
then,
love the book. My
right.
my older my older brother Vince used to do that, and then one day he figured out that I really did want the truth. And Westerfield's Chain. When I wrote that, he said, I bring the manuscript to him, and or I go back over there. He's got the manuscript, and he starts paging through it, and he doesn't have any comments. And I think, oh, this is pretty good. He probably, when he
Right.
gets to about page 50, something like that, he says, "Here's where the book starts, Jack,"
Right.
and he was
Yeah.
right. So I had to throw out that 50
Yeah.
pages, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Uh,
No,
yeah.
but you're right.
So,
That's exactly what we need as writers, is somebody to say, "This is really good. This doesn't work."
but this doesn't work. Yeah,
Right.
but
And,
this doesn't work.
and we're
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, but I love that part. And it's like it doesn't matter. If it doesn't work for the reader, it doesn't work. And so you need it's an adjustment, but it is what we need to hear. So yeah. So
Yeah.
talk to me about your newer character, Nick Acropolis. He's in Nickel Dime Town, but this is not his first book. Talk to me a little bit about that, the character, where that comes from. Still,
Oh, he's the classic.
say again?
He comes from Raymond Chandler. He comes from Raymond Chandler, but I can't write that good. But yeah, no, it's just I loved Chandler when I was a kid, and I wanted to write a private eye novel. So Westerfield's Chain was the first one, and that actually, I mean, the plot of that book, it's about welfare fraud, and that was something I covered as a journalist. This
Okay.
welfare fraud story here, and actually, the real story is more incredible than the story the way I presented it, because if I did the real story, people would say, "Oh, that's crazy," it was too much. So I had to back it off. So uh, and then Highway Side, that's the second Nick Acropolis book. That's about a truck driver running drugs. And Dancing on Graves, it's one of his old. He sent a guy to prison for a murder, and now like the Innocent Project or something like that comes along,
Sure.
and they want him to help get the guy out of prison. So that's that he sent the wrong guy to prison is the idea. And
Right.
then Nickel Town is it's Uh, these guys running these little grocery corner stores out of business so they can make more money with their corner stores. And of course, they happen to be cops, so that makes it a little more interesting. Uh, but yeah, so Nick Acropolis, it's just he's an ex-cop, he's an ex-homicide detective. He got thrown off the force for trying to cover up for one of his partners, and partner went to prison. And I think it's a good representation of Chicago and the police force a little bit.
Okay. And yeah, so we've already touched on this a little bit just in this brief period, but you've got some self-published novels. You've got this one on hard case, and the publishing business is uh difficult, let's just say that, in a understatement, to continually um make any money from. And so talk to me a little bit about the process, because you've been a Seamus Award finalist with one of the Nick Acropolis books. Is that right?
Yeah, Westerfield Chain, the first
Right.
one.
Right.
With,
So you've got that, right? And then you have this book on hard case crime, which did well, and yet you're still self-publishing. So talk to me about like the not just the process of that, but you had mentioned earlier you have an agent.
just for another couple of days, and then he's gone. Thank God.
Right. Okay. So you have an agent. A lot of writers don't even have agents. So you have an agent, and you keep on writing these novels, but it is, you're finding it very difficult to find I don't want to say an audience because that's not correct. It's the platform for it, right? The label, the icon they're going to put on the side of the book, whatever it is. So talk to me a little bit about the process of how that's worked.
Well, if I knew anything about publishing, I probably wouldn't be in the boat I'm in right now because I've never, I mean, I'm a writer and really trying to sell books is not something I'm interested in. And even in the cab, it was hard to try to sell the book. I never tried to sell the book to anybody. I hung it up on a suction cup to the dashboard, had a clip there, and if they asked, I would
Right.
tell them about it. And
Gotcha.
if it was for sale, I would say yes, and if they asked how much, I would tell them how much. But no, I don't know. I mean, I've had a lot of good agents. I had a woman named Muriel Nellis. She was trying to sell Relita's Angels. She never did. Sterling Lord was my agent for a while. He's the same guy who sold on. He was Ken Kesey's agent. He sold it. He's half the guys in Chicago. He was their agent. He was a great guy. Uh, he just died a couple of years ago. And but the only agent who ever sold anything for me was this kid, Rob Preskill, who was
Hmm.
just getting into the business. Who I met in the cab one night, and he sold two books for me. He
Nice.
sold Westerfield's Chain to St. Martin's. He sold this book with my mother to Putnam Plume. And he had a deal for Relita's Angel with Warner Books. It was going to be one of the early ebooks, and
Uh-huh.
they could never come to terms, so we got out of it. Uh, so no, I've never had it, and I've got an agent now who I thought was going to be a good agent, and he's been a bust.
Gotcha.
I think he was a good agent. He's just too old.
Hmm.
But I'm a little pissed that he wouldn't let me out of this contract until it expired.
Yeah, I'll bet. I'll bet. It is crazy the way that works. And there are, I know, up and coming writers, I shouldn't even say that, younger writers who are unfamiliar with the territory think, oh, I just have to find an agent and things will be okay. And it's not that simple. It hasn't been that simple in many decades. It is not that simple. I hear stories all the time of writers who publish one book and it does well, but now they need to find a new publisher. And they publish another novel and it does well, and now they need to find a new agent and and a new publisher. Because if I mean, I hate to say it, but in this industry right now, especially with the Power Five, publishers, the Random Houses and Farrar Straus and all that. Um, if you don't have a legitimate series attached to a character that they know they can sell books with consistently, like a Jack Reacher or a Lucas Davenport or whatever it is, um, they're not that interested. And so there's so many authors out there who are wonderfully talented writers who are consistently having to work for agents and publishers and everything else. And that's just the nature of the business right now.
Yeah, it's I mean that's it. It's but there's a lot. You're right. There's a lot of good stuff out there. I mean, there's a lot of
There is.
garbage out there too, but there's a
Oh,
lot of good writing out there.
hmm
And I always figure, God, if how I mean, I've always known other writers. I've been published. I was a journalist, this, that, and the other thing. How about the guy who's just writing his book, doesn't know anybody?
hmm
Although they say if you're not published at all, you have a little better chance than if you've been published and didn't sell anything, which is kind of my thing. Besides this hard case crime thing, none of my books sold anything.
hmm
So yeah, so yeah, I feel for those guys who are trying to get out there, and they don't know anybody, they don't know anything, they don't know, you know, but self-publishing is not really an answer unless you can promote it, which I
Right,
can't. So
right.
I self-publish a book and it doesn't do that's how I found out Tarantino was because I took back this is the original hard case crime,
hmm
Nobody's Angel, which is my favorite cover of the four different versions of the book. But
Uh-huh.
I took it back after our contract expired after 10 years. I took it back because Charles didn't want to give me any money. So I said, no, I'll take it back and self-publish it. So this was mine. So I self-published it this way. And but it would sell a copy here, a copy there. I might sell five, six, maybe 10 copies a month. And then suddenly it's selling six, seven copies a day.
hmm
What is going on here?
Yeah.
And,
And I need to talk to you about that because I meant to ask you earlier, forgot, but this quote is, and we talked about this earlier, but the quote on the front of this book is from Tarantino, like you said, QT, my favorite novel this year. How did that happen?
it's
Like,
from an Amazon celebrity pick. They asked him. He picked three books, but mine was the one novel, I think, and then he had two other books. And no, it's great. He's a good writer. He's obviously a great director. Uh,
yeah.
so yeah, but it really changed my whole career in a sense. I mean, I got the republication with the hard case, and that sold more books than the first time.
hmm I believe it. Yeah.
And I've got a there's a French translation coming out, an Italian translation coming out. And that's all because of Tarantino.
That's awesome.
Um, so thank you.
Right.
Uh, but,
Right.
but how it happened, I don't know. I mean, obviously, my friends say, "Well, Jack, how did he?" I said, "Well, he obviously liked the book." And they said, "Well, how did he get to it?" I said, "Well, everybody, of course, he reads hard case crime. You can't avoid hard case crime if you're making the kind of movies he's making and writing the kind of books. I mean, everybody looks at hard case crime a little bit."
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's probably true. I think that's probably true. Yeah. That's definitely a goal, by the way, for us. Starlight.
Well,
Um, so so you would mention that you have I believe a few unpublished novels still sitting around.
yeah, I got a memoir, My Days as a Long Haul Furniture Mover, and then I got four novels: The B-Side of Misty, Murder Reporter, Paris in a Bottle, and The Morning She Left. And then I got a collection of short stories too. They're all so I got these five books that I finally nickel dime town that was there in the pile too, and I finally thought, well, I got to get some of this stuff out just to get.
Mhm.
How can I possibly? So I'm probably just going to start self-publishing these, but I'm still hoping I get rid of this agent and maybe I get another agent. Maybe something will happen.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, so that uh, I'm not a young guy anymore, so I don't want to die and leave these books in my dresser drawer. So I will
Sure.
self-publish them, worst come to worst. But
Sure. Sure.
without any promotion, without knowing how to promote, and with, being too lazy to find out and too cheap to hire anybody. Or, what did I try recently? One of these, I've tried Amazon,
Yeah.
you know, and nothing happens, but at least they don't charge you. If you don't get any clicks, you don't pay. So that was okay. But then I tried, I can't think of the names of the guys who, well, anyways, I tried that. I gave them $100 or something and got nothing. Didn't sell a single book.
Hmm.
So that was,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean that without question, man, that is the difficult aspect of publishing at this point because like you mentioned when we weren't even recording yet, we were just chatting. The publishing industry has changed so tremendously in the last 30 years because in the 90s when you wanted to self-publish or publish with a really small press, you would need to essentially purchase a good 1,000 to 1,500 copies of your book before you ever even were able to, you essentially had to buy your book and hope you could sell it at places. As
I don't
opposed
know anything about that.
as opposed to now with the internet with print on demand, you don't need to do anything. You just need to set the book up, and whenever it gets sold, one
Yeah.
prints and it goes out, and that's phenomenal. I mean, uh, and so, but the problem is, like you were mentioning earlier, is that marketing that book becomes very difficult because how did people find out about the book? In the older days, not old, but older, people would read the book reviews, LA Times book review, Washington Post, New York Times, whatever. But nowadays, nobody's getting in that without being in the Power Five grouping.
Well,
So,
in Chicago, there are no real. I mean, I think the Trib's got a page they run
mhm,
once. I don't know, not, but it's a couple books. They used to have a book review. The Sun Times used to have a book review. So, but
yeah,
neither they don't.
yeah,
Neither one has a full book review, a section like they used to,
yeah,
like New York
like
Times had.
like they used to, yeah. And so it just it becomes all about the marketing for the book. And then all of a sudden it becomes about social media and it becomes about all of, TikTok and Instagram and all this stuff that a lot of people, if you're not into that or know about that realm, it becomes, kind of a language you don't even get. And so it really is a challenge. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Um, and that's one of the issues with self-publishing these days. However, it's now easier to self-publish than it's ever been. And so there is that too, which is
Oh
nice.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But that just means more competition. Plus, a
Yeah.
lot of stuff gets published. Like I said, there's a lot of good stuff, but there's a lot of garbage too. So a lot of stuff gets published and it shouldn't be published, or you
Oh,
know,
sure.
and then people get turned off. They read a, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I want to touch on this real quick because there are lots of writers out there who are very much associated with one particular locale. You have Michael Connolly or James Elroy, obviously Chandler with Marlowe in Los Angeles. You've got Dashiell Hammett with Sam Spade up in San Francisco, and you've got James Lee Burke with Dave Robichaux down in Iberia Parish near New Orleans. Um, and so there are these writers that are just connected to a certain locale. Like that's their, meat and potatoes. Every time I look you up, or every time that I'm reading a review of yours, or every time anything like that, it's always Chicago, 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 Chicago. And I know you've been in Chicago for a very long time. I get it. But talk to me about that because a lot of writers write about all over. You tend to focus specifically on Chicago, and I kind of feel like you are one of those writers at this point who are known for being from and about Chicago. So
Well,
talk.
I know have a novel set in Paris, but that hasn't been published yet. So,
Okay.
but it's a Chicago cab driver goes to Paris, so it's still some kind of
There you go. Yeah.
Chicago connection. But no, I mean, what do I know about it except Chicago? I've lived here my whole life. I'm here now. Um, it's I grew up on the west side. I live on the north side now. I don't know anything else. I mean, I've got a book, Backdoor to LA, where Eddie Miles, it's the follow-up to
Yeah.
Nobody's Angel. And Eddie Miles comes out to LA, but just at the end of the book a little bit. So I got him down Pier Blossom Highway, which I thought was pretty good. Uh, but Yeah, I mean that's all I know of Chicago, and it's fun to write. I mean, I drove a cab all those years, so you really learn some stuff about. I mean, that's why I wanted to drive a cab because I knew I would learn stuff about the city. I'd figure out the city, and I already because my two favorite writers growing up were Raymond Chandler, Nelson Algren, L.A. and Chicago. Algren wrote about Chicago,
Yep.
Chandler wrote about L.A. And it's just, I mean, I wanted to be able to do something like that. So that's what I've done. I mean, uh, yeah, so everybody met, but also, being a cab driver, I get it. I forget sometimes my private detective novel is not a cab driver novel, and I'm given all the routes, and I
Right,
have to
right, right.
stop
Yeah.
myself. I have to stop myself sometimes. But
Yeah, I can only imagine. Sure.
uh, and also, one of the funniest moments was when Westerfield Chain, when I wrote this, I had had the idea for years, and there was a riot one of the race riots in Chicago was in the book, that was in the novel,
Uh-huh.
and that was part of the plot. But by the time I got around to writing it and rewriting it and getting it published, it didn't work. The timeline didn't work.
Ah,
So I invented a riot that I called the anniversary riot, which was 10 years and a day after this riot, right?
sure.
My sister says to me once, one of my sisters, she says, Jack, I must have been out of town or something. I don't remember the riot.
Right, right, right. Yeah. But you know what, man, that's the creative license, right? That we take to some degree because I was doing so my Sonny Haynes novels, I'm working on the second one right now, third book because the second one was short stories, but the I have a situation where I write in the early 50s, right? So the first one was 1951 in LA. Okay. And I'm from LA, not that I was there in 1951, certainly, but I'm from LA, so I know it well. So I wrote about some locales, some areas that I knew or I was pretty sure hadn't been written about much in the noir genre before that. So I tried to cover those, right? And then all of a sudden in the short stories, once I started writing the numerous short stories for Outlaw Ballads, I moved him out to Palm Springs. So now he's in Palm Springs, 1952, and he's got this job. But I'm writing this new novel, and I wrote so many short stories in that period that I realized now that I did all this research on 1952, and at that time, the Chicago White Sox, funny enough, talk about Chicago White Sox were in Palm Springs for spring training. But by
Uh,
the time that I'm writing this new novel, it now has to be 1953 because 1952 doesn't work anymore because I've written way too many stories in that year. And all of a sudden, I look up and there's really nobody there in spring training for 1953. So I'm just keeping the White Sox there. I'm not going to
yeah,
worry about the factual aspect of it. And we're going to talk about the players and the uniforms. They actually wore shorts for a little bit during spring training there.
Chico's Carrasco was probably on that team. He was the first of the great Venezuelan shortstops, and he was a national hero in Venezuela. And I think they had a day of mourning when when he died down there. Uh,
Then yeah, I should include that absolutely. But that's my point is that you try to make things fit, but then sometimes
yeah,
it
look,
doesn't work out.
gotta get to the end of the book. That's the that's the main thing.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly. So you had mentioned I want to talk about some writers for you, and you've already mentioned Chandler, who I'm a huge fan of, and Algren as well, actually. Um, and so and with Algren's catalog in particular, what are some of your favorites with, Walk on the Wild Side or Man with the Golden Arm or.
Yeah, I have a hard time with Walk on the Wild Side, just all the dialect. I have a hard time reading that much of it. I love The Man
Okay.
with the Golden Arm. That's the reason, my father gave me that when I was 16, and before I
Awesome.
was off the first page, I wanted to be a writer.
Uh-huh.
So, well, however that happens, I don't know, but that's what happened. And I love that book. I love Chicago City on the Make, which is a prose poem about Chicago. It's a kind of a hipster's history of Chicago.
Sure.
Uh, so that's good. I love Notes of a Sea Diary, Hemingway
Yeah.
All the Way.
I have that
That's
one
a
too. Yeah,
yeah, that's a very good book.
it is.
Yeah. Uh, but now I read, when I look through the Golden Arm now, it's tough reading compared, he's just, but it really got me as a kid.
Yep.
Uh, and it still gets me. I mean, it's a great book. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful book.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. So besides Marlowe and Algren, obviously accepting those are the top two. Who are some writers that have either influenced you or you feel like they've inspired the writing in some way?
Oh, I don't really know. No, but I wrote a play here once that was up. I co-wrote a play with another guy, and
Hmm.
I never thought these critics knew much what they were talking about. But this
Right?
this critic, Hetty Weiss in the Chicago Sun-Times, and reviewing the play says, "Echoes of Chandler and Elmer." And I thought, oh well, they got
Yeah.
my number. I thought that was pretty funny. I don't know who's I love Elmer Leonard a lot. Elmer Leonard just I think
Sure.
is great. And he did a great thing too in an interview with him. He said that he got a lot of his style from a guy named Richard Bissell. Well, I
Hmm.
was living a block from the library, and I went down to the library. And well, Richard Bissell he was actually a big time guy in the 50s.
Hmm.
And you can just, I think, like Leonard's style and Bissell's style is like sort of like you're telling your best friend a story, and you're
Hmm.
both in on, your best friend sees the world the same way you do, so
Sure.
you don't have to explain that much. And anyways, I thought that was great that Leonard said that. I wish I could tell you somebody that inspired me that way. And as soon as we're done here, it'll come to my mind. I'll tell you this, my favorite book, and it's kind of a pulp novel in a sense, is this German book, Every Man Dies Alone,
Uh-huh.
Hans Vidala. It was written right after the war. It's about a resistance case during the World War II, that is. And it's just incredible. It's heartbreaking.
Oh, I bet.
And he was a well-known writer. He had a Hollywood movie made of one of his books in the 30s, and yeah, he spent half the war in prison or in a mental asylum, and then he committed suicide shortly after he wrote the book. But it's a wonderful book. Every Man Dies Alone, and I would call it pulpy.
Okay. Excellent. Very cool. Well, yeah, that's pretty funny that reviewer immediately picked
Oh
out
yeah,
your two. Yeah. Chandler and Algren. That's that's
yeah.
that's that's pretty funny.
I,
That
I
doesn't
didn't
happen
hide
too
it.
often.
I didn't hide it.
But I can tell you from reading Eddie Miles Drives Again, the news story that's going to be in the review. I personally saw a decent amount of Elroy, or sorry, not Elroy, Elmer Leonard in that. I did. The dialogue. I mean,
Oh well, yeah. The
yeah,
what?
the dialogue.
The
I
Eddie Miles Drives Again. You're saying
yeah,
it?
yeah,
Oh yeah. Okay. Okay.
yeah. I definitely see some EL in there. So, and that's never a
I
bad
read
thing.
an awful lot of it.
Yeah, and
No,
I
no,
mean,
no. He's a wonderful writer.
yeah, he's one of the masters of dialogue, at least in from the 20th century. So, yeah. All right, well, hang out for a minute. Thanks so much for coming by today. This has been Jack Clark, Nobody's Angel, Hard Case Crime. Nickel Dimetown is his newest one, featuring Nick Acropolis, who is the PI in this. This is the third. Am I correct? Third novel.
Fourth.
Fourth of the Nick Acropolis novels. Excellent.
Fourth and
And
final.
so fourth and final. Okay. And so Jack, thanks for being on today, man. I appreciate you. And uh, like I said,
Thanks for
Jack
having
has a
me.
new story in the new review as well. So have a look for that. And appreciate you guys. Thank you.
in this topsy-turvy